Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Global Atheist News, our weekly report on how religion has impacted humanity over the past 7 days. This week's headlines. The Norway attack is being treated as Islamist terrorism by police. Pride protesters defy the Norway police's warnings. Salah Abdeslam is judged guilty as the historic Paris Islamic terrorism trial ends. The world reacts to the USA Supreme Court's overturning of Roe versus Wade. In several states, protesters clashed with police, and major firms have pledged to pay staff travel expenses for abortions. Representative Lauren Boebert says she is tired of separation between church and state. The church is supposed to direct the government. And Russian Patriarch Kirill slipped and fell on holy water. A 42-year-old man has been arrested and charged with murder, attempted murder, and terrorist acts after a shooting in the center of Norway's capital, Oslo. The shootings were in and near the London pub, a popular LGBTQ+ venue, the Herr Nilsson Jazz Club, and another pub. 2 people died and 21 were wounded in what police call an act of Islamist terrorism. Eyewitnesses said the suspect took out a gun from his bag and started firing, forcing terrified people to either throw themselves to the ground or flee. The attacker was arrested by police officers who were helped by bystanders minutes later. And 2 weapons were retrieved at the crime scene by police, one of them a fully automatic gun. The authorities later said that the suspect was a Norwegian national, and the terror alert in Norway has now been raised to its highest level, although the country's intelligence service said it had no indication currently that further attacks were likely. Police described the attack as Islamist terrorism and said all upcoming Pride events should be cancelled for safety reasons. Extremists consider LGBT people the enemy, the national police chief said. Law enforcement officials requested that all Pride events be indefinitely postponed on Monday because the gatherings remained a target. Oslo's annual gay parade was due to be held on Saturday and was formally cancelled on police advice. Despite that, hundreds of people marched near the scene later in the day, shouting, "We're here, we're queer, we won't disappear." Rainbow flags and flowers were laid near the scene of the attack, which was sealed off by police tape, and bystanders comforted each other with hugs. The gunman was known to security services since 2015 as a suspected radicalized Islamist and had a history of mental illness, Norway's intelligence service said. The threat assessment is still standing. We have an unclear terror situation, Oslo police official Martin Strand pleaded on Monday, urging people not to attend an event outside Oslo's City Hall to remember the victims of Saturday's attack. But thousands ignored that advice and gathered there anyway, holding up placards with a defiant message such as, "You can't cancel us," and "Sexual freedom." The only surviving attacker from the group that carried out the November 2015 Paris attacks has been found guilty of terrorism and murder charges. Salah Abdeslam received a rare full life sentence for his role in the gun and bomb attacks that killed 130 people. The attacks across bars, restaurants, the National Football Stadium, and the Bataclan music venue on the 13th of November 2015 saw hundreds injured alongside those killed. The court also convicted 19 other men involved, 6 of whom are believed to be dead. The trial, the biggest in modern French history, began last September. And at the beginning of the trial, Abdeslam was defiant, describing himself as a soldier of the so-called Islamic State group. But he later apologized to the victims, telling the court in his closing remarks that he was not a murderer or a killer, and that to convict him of murder would be an injustice. He also claimed during the trial that he decided not to detonate his suicide vest on the night of the attack and disposed of it in a Paris suburb. However, the court accepted evidence that the suicide vest was defective, and therefore it did not believe that Abdeslam had experienced a last-minute change of heart. His full life sentence means there is only a small chance of parole after 30 years. It is the most severe penalty for criminals in France and is rarely handed down by the country's courts. See this video featuring a relative of a victim.
Tomorrow, everything ends, but we still have our injuries and our traumas and our nightmares and our wounds. So we still have to keep on living with that. And it's not because the trial ends that this ends. I feel pretty scared, honestly, of the emptiness of what's coming. I don't actually feel too good tonight. Nothing satisfying about the verdict and nothing satisfying about the fact that it ends. I guess we need to process all this a little bit.
I think it's quite good to be able to breathe again after 9 months, because it was 9 terrible months, because we have to wait, we have to go back into this tragedy in order to go into the details of what did happen, and it was quite long. So it's quite very important for us to arrive at the end of this trail and to be able to somewhere to quit a kind of collective tragedy, to go further in our personal tragedy, because we have to go further and to live without my son Hugo.
Honestly, I feel a bit lost and I'm not sure what I think, but I feel a mix of, being happy that it's done, having a lot of questions on what the future holds, and proud to have been a part of, this wonderful trial. It's been very hard, but the verdict shows that it was worth the time, that we were able to come to a conclusion that, looks at every individual in the dock and is able to.
The US Supreme Court's overturning of the constitutional right to abortion is being felt in countries across the world, where activists on both sides of the debate have been explaining what it means to them. In Italy, there's been a chorus of condemnation and alarm from the political left and centre. Emma Bonino, a leftist former foreign minister, said it showed there was a risk of Italy moving backwards and of losing achievements that had seemed permanent. But on the right, some feel galvanized. A great victory, declared Simone Pilon from the far-right league, adding that he hoped Italy and Europe would follow suit. However, his party leader, Matteo Salvini, was notably more nuanced, stating that he believes in the value of life, but on pregnancy, the last word belongs to the woman. Perhaps a recognition that the majority of Italians say they still support the right to abort. Across the island of Ireland, the news of the US Supreme Court ruling has triggered a swift and passionate response. The issue stirs deep emotions where abortion was only relatively recently decriminalised. Many vocal Irish campaign groups and activists still exist on both sides. The world continues to watch America become unrecognizable, wrote Dr. Jennifer Cassidy, a university lecturer who was in Dublin when jubilant crowds celebrated as the Republic of Ireland voted to decriminalise abortion in 2018. The story of Savita Halapanava, who died of sepsis in Ireland in 2012 because she was not allowed a termination, is now being reshared widely by people warning Americans to prepare themselves for many similar deaths. A shameful decision, said Grain Taggart of Amnesty International, who has fought hard for abortion rights in Northern Ireland. But campaigners who were devastated by the legislation of abortion on the island of Ireland have been reinvigorated. It's a bit of a wake-up for us here, said Bernie Smythe, one of Northern Ireland's most prominent anti-abortion campaigners. There's a lot to be learned from what is happening in the US. My personal hope for the future is that we too will one day reverse the legislation. I think the movement in the US has been very wise. This brings a lot of hope, and the battle goes on. In Latin America, just as they felt the tide was beginning to turn on abortion, many reproductive rights campaigners now fear the worst. This will embolden the most conservative groups in our countries who consistently deny women rights, says Mariana Moiza, a leading pro-abortion rights activist in El Salvador, where abortion is banned in all cases, including where the mother's life is endangered, rape, or incest. The denial of the human rights of women and girls being forced to bear children who are the product of abuse disproportionately affects the poorest in society, she says. Meanwhile, anti-abortion politicians who control El Salvador's parliament have welcomed the move and insist that their position on abortion remains the dominant view in the Americas. Canada's progressive-leaning Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, did not mince words, calling it a devastating setback and horrific for women. Quite frankly, it is an attack on everyone's freedoms and rights, Mr. Trudeau said. Abortion has been decriminalised in Canada since 1983, but access is not a guaranteed right. In many areas, women have to drive for hours to get abortions. There are many anti-abortion Canadians, but the issue has not been politicised to the same degree as it has south of their border. In India, gender justice activists have described the ruling as a huge step back for women's rights and say it's guided by Victorian morality. Dr. Veena J.S., activist and forensic medicine professor who teaches medical ethics to doctors, says the Roe v. Wade ruling will impact women's reproductive rights not just in the US, but have a cascading effect around the world. America is generally a model for the world, and I fear at some point India could take a cue from them and bring in a similar legislation, she says, and we will be forced to raise children we don't want. This, Dr. Veena says, will affect the physical and mental health of women and children, and research has shown that postpartum psychosis and depression increases in women who are forced against their will to give birth, and the quality of these unwanted children will also be poor. Abortions have been legal in India since 1971, although with conditions, especially to curb female feticide in a country with an overwhelming preference for sons. But because of a general lack of awareness among women, because of stigma attached to the topic, and because of doctors' reluctance to perform abortions out of religious or moral beliefs, it means a majority of abortions are still held outside of registered medical facilities. Meanwhile, protests have erupted in the USA. See this video of protesters in Washington and Manhattan.
You say right! Abortion! Abortion! When I say abortion, you say...
Tear gas was fired and a taser was drawn in other states. This video is from South Carolina. Since the Supreme Court ruling, a growing number of companies have confirmed they will cover travel costs through their health insurance plans for employees who leave their home state to get an abortion. That includes Amazon, Disney, JP Morgan, and Meta, the parent of Facebook and Instagram. Still in the USA, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert was a guest speaker at Cornerstone Christian Center in Basalt, Colorado. Listen to what she says on this video. And Patriarch Kirill slips and falls on some holy water. See this video. Following last week's very enjoyable show with Chris Shelton on Scientology, do watch that if you can. This week's Free Thought Hour guest is Dr. Timothy Miller, a CPU, AI, and Minecraft expert. You can join in by texting your comments and questions. And don't forget to watch Global Atheist News Review, our spin-off show where a panel of opinionated people get a chance to express their views on this very news. The GAN team will be back with our weekly news report next week. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and set the notifications. This has been Global Atheist News. Thank you for watching.